So today I'm here with my friend Daniel Robertson. He's a relationship coach and he's an expert in nonviolent communication, which is something I know very little about. And so, Daniel, you told me yesterday when we were talking about this about giraffe ears, and I love the concept of giraffe ears. Can you talk to me about giraffe ears and jackal ears?
We've all been in relationship situations where our partner is saying something to us that we are having difficulty receiving,
Every day.
right? And it comes across in the form of some kind of criticism. And we think, why is my partner criticizing me? Why are they saying this in such an aggressive or confrontational way? Why can't they appreciate what I'm doing and be more loving toward me? And it's called giraffe speak because the giraffe is the land animal with the largest heart. And giraffe speak means we focus on our own experience and communicate what's alive in us rather than communicating our analysis, especially our analysis about another person.
Okay. Wow. This is so different from how I do things. What's alive in you right now?
What's alive in me? So since we just started this podcast, I'm feeling a little maybe nervous. I could say a little bit nervous. I could say a little bit like, where's this going to go? How can we make this interesting?
So if you were giraffe speaking, you would focus only on what's alive in you right now. You would try not to get into the analysis.
If I share my analysis in a way where I say, I notice that I'm having thoughts that I want to make this an interesting podcast episode for people where they can get value and understand how to apply it to their life. If now I'm revealing part of my experience, which includes the thoughts that are going on inside of me. If I say, this is the way it is, now I'm just communicating analysis.
Okay.
Do you see?
What do you think is the single biggest mistake people make in their relationship, like related to communication?
You and I talk about brains all the time and how our brains are wired for a negativity bias. And so that is a big problem that I see in relationships where we are so focused, instead of focusing on the 95% of things that are going well, we focus on the 5% that is creating some kind of upset for us.
So I think of that a little differently because I don't think of it as a negativity bias. I think of it as a focus problem. And what I tell people to do is to zoom out and look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
And so I like to think of this in terms of that my brain has a tendency to focus on whatever seems most problematic at the time, which I guess you could call negativity bias. If I zoom out and look at the bigger picture, everything's fine.
Yeah.
But when I allow my brain to focus on what seems most problematic right now, then nothing seems fine, and I don't feel okay. And with my brain in that state, I actually end up making things worse. Whereas if I can zoom out and look at the bigger picture, part of looking at the bigger picture allows me to treat you as a human being and not as an object to be manipulated. Whereas when I'm zoom in and looked at this, what's worse right now, the part of my brain that focuses in on that what's worse right now is also the part of my brain that tries to manipulate objects.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
yeah, that's the way I say it. And so that's the left brain. The right brain can zoom out, look at the bigger picture, and the right brain does not try to manipulate people as if they were inanimate objects. So that is a big difference that I try to focus on. Before we started recording, I read you a poem, and the reason I did that is to try to reset my brain into my right brain so that I can see you as a person and not try to control you, not try to steer you in a certain way, but kind of respect your autonomy and your sovereignty as a person.
So in conflict, what we will do is we focus on, in our communication, who is right and who is wrong. So usually we will approach the other person by expressing what we think is wrong. Now we might try to say it in a nice way.
Yeah, sure.
We might try to say it in soft language, or we might try to, sugarcoat or do whatever.
You try to soften it, sure.
But we are trying to get across what we think is wrong.
Yeah.
And then the other person will often receive it that way by doing one of two things. They might become aggressive or argue back, or they might become defensive. They might withdraw. Different possible responses to being presented with information that you might be wrong. If we shift our focus to curiosity, making space. These are the terminology I would use for, I think, part of what you're describing, but focus on creating space for both people's experience, which to me is a big part of seeing somebody as a whole human being, rather than in a myopic way where I'm just focused on some behavior that I don't like. When we shift from who's right and who's wrong to how can I get curious about the entire experience that includes not only my experience but your experience as well.
Yeah, that's okay. There's so much overlap in how I think about this, because I think about it as zooming out.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that the way that I've started thinking about this as the difference between the way the left brain deals with the world and the way the right brain deals with the world is that there are some really fun ways to activate the right brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so you and I were talking yesterday after our workout class that we both attended, and that is a very right brain activating thing to do, because we're moving, it's a men's workout group, and we're all, we're doing push-ups together, and we're doing squats together, and we're running together. And whenever people get together and move their bodies in unison, that turns on your right brain. And so you and I were in this very right brain activated state after doing this workout together, and it led to a really fruitful conversation. Now, in a room like this, there is a tendency or temptation to go into the left brain and start focusing on little things without maintaining a constant awareness of, wait a second, how important actually is this?
Yeah.
It's very similar to what you're saying. What you're saying, if I get focused in on the wrong part of the story, then I can talk for an hour about something that doesn't even matter, which is, I think, an experience that couples have all the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so fascinating because I don't have the education in right brain versus left brain. I started reading your book recommendation.
The book we're talking about is McGilchrist, The Master and His Emissary.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where this all comes from.
Exactly.
But just like you, I hadn't read this book until last year, and before I read the book, all these ideas were still jumbled up in my head. But McGilchrist gave me this beautiful framework to pin them all onto, and they all just align perfectly. And so it's interesting because I felt my brain shift. I can feel the shift in my brain. That's why I read poetry in sessions, is I want to have that brain shift. I want to keep myself from getting focused on something that doesn't matter. And for some reason, it's just really helpful for me to think of this as right brain versus left brain. But it also gives me some tools. I know that if I get up and move my body, or if I read a poem or sing a song, or even listen to a song, then I'm going to help create that shift in myself. And so there's these external tools that I've learned that help me make the shift and then hold that balance between the right brain and the left brain.
Now, my own experience was, for a lot of my life, I was told, you're always in your head, you're always trying to logic through things. And I saw that in a way as being cut off from my body and my emotions, from somatic experiencing. I didn't experience life in terms of what is my, full body, holistic experience. I would experience primarily thoughts. And now, does that relate to at all for you?
No, absolutely. Where the right brain is the part of our brain that interacts with the real world. The left brain interacts with a map or symbolic representation of the world. And the problem is that without the right brain's constant updating of the map, then the map starts to get corrupted and it drifts away from reality. And so the longer I stay in my left brain without coming back to the right brain, then my map drifts and drifts and drifts. And in extreme cases, this leads to schizophrenia, which is just a complete divorcing from reality. Now, most of us aren't schizophrenic, but we still drift into this divided reality. I talk to couples all the time, and they tell me about their arguments, and they're like, well, the next day, it just seems so ridiculous what we're talking about. But at the moment, it seemed like the most important thing in the world. And then the next day, they're like, oh, we were such idiots. But that's the drift. Because they got so into their left brains that the things they were talking about weren't even real anymore. They weren't important. They start arguing about things that were very disconnected from reality, and that's what happens when we lose that connection.
So I see this for men because it can happen for men or women. But generally, statistically speaking, I'm often talking with a woman who feels like she can't emotionally connect with her man because he's in his head all the time.
Yeah, sure.
He's not experiencing his life in an embodied way. And now I think men have been socialized to suppress emotion. We're kind of told that our emotions aren't important. Just suck it up. You got to push through. It doesn't matter how you feel. That was a lot of the messaging I've heard, and
yeah,
a lot
it's
of
interesting because the only exception to that is that anger is considered normal for men, and
right.
which is really interesting because anger is the only left brain emotion.
Okay.
All the other emotions live in the right brain, and it does seem. I can kind of see, like, I generally disagree with a lot of male-female differences that people talk about, but in this case, I do see how women are kind of taught to discourage their anger, at least hide it, and men are kind of taught that it's okay to be angry. It's a natural part of being a man to be angry.
Yeah.
And anger, frustration, resentment are the left brain emotions, and all of the other feelings are characteristic of the right brain. And so sadness, depression, longing, remorse, all these kind of beautiful, nuanced, complex emotions live in the right brain, and then, rah, rah, rah lives in the left brain.
Right.
So
the anger and those similar emotions are all externalizing. They're not vulnerable.
no, they're actually designed. The way I see them is they're designed to control people, and so I agree with you. They are completely different. Anger, frustration, resentment, which I think of as just three different flavors of anger, are designed. It is a way for me to try to influence you, or to put you into a certain position, or to move you to a certain kind of action. Whereas if I'm feeling, say, longing or remorse, it's completely different. And so I think we do ourselves a disservice when we put all these things on, say, an emotion wheel, and we're like, oh, on this side is anger, on this side is remorse. I'm like, those two have nothing to do with each other. Anger is one thing. Anger is a way to try to manipulate people. Remorse is this internal experience, and it's kind of beautiful. Joy, sadness, relief, remorse, longing, conviction, all these things, peace, they have nothing to do with anger and resentment and frustration. It's a whole different thing.
So I see what you're saying, and I agree. The only nuance that I would just kind of add to that is I think all of our emotions do serve really important purposes. So anger isn't only about manipulating other people, right? I think anger, so for some people who suppress their anger, I mean, like you mentioned, a lot of women have been told don't be angry. If you suppress your anger, then you're not allowing that to come up within you to let you know, hey, I might be overgiving right now. Sure. I might be not being assertive enough about my own needs in life.
Sure.
And so, anger serves a really important purpose for us to notice when we need to assert a boundary or something like that.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. The way I think about it is that anger emerges from a perception of powerlessness. So when I feel powerless, it's like what you're saying, I need to assert a boundary. If I feel like I am not doing enough to take care of myself, I feel powerless, or I feel helpless, or I feel not safe, then unless I do something about that, I will start to get angry. And so when I talk to people about anger, I'm like, you need to deal with your perception of powerlessness. And first you need to figure out, are you really powerless or not? As adults, especially as adult men, we are rarely powerless. Like that is not a common thing that happens to us. We usually have quite a bit of freedom, quite a few choices, things that we could do to make our lives better, things that we could do to take care of ourselves. But we like to lapse into kind of this victim stance, at this perception of powerless or illusion of powerlessness, and then we get angry. And so I often tell people, don't try to stop being angry, figure out how to be more powerful. And when you act as a more powerful or agentic person, you'll find yourself getting less angry.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that's really important. I think anger serves a purpose, and then once we can kind of move out of it, recognizing the areas where we do have power, can really help us to move out of it quite quickly.
But you're treating it as a signal of something that you need to do differently, not as like, I'm angry, so I'm going to act on my anger. That's not the right path. I'm angry, so I need to say, oh, now wait a second. what do I need to change in my life so I won't feel so angry?
Right.
Because when I feel anger and I'm in a relationship, I'm going to start tearing apart that relationship if I'm angry, right? Now, if I can see anger and do what you said and say, this is an indication that maybe I need a better boundary.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to go do something about that boundary. Guess what? Now I don't feel angry.
Right.
I'm going to feel less angry because I started
Right.
taking care of myself.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great way to take responsibility for our own feelings.
Sure.
And recognize them for what they are. So are you having a right brain experience right now or a left brain?
Well, it's a balance. What we're doing, this kind of precision conversation we're having,
Yeah.
that kind of language lives in the left brain. However, I do think my brain feels pretty balanced right now.
Good.
So if we were pure right brain, we would be like banging drums and like chanting and like dancing around, right? That would be a very right brain experience, okay? A balanced experience is you and I are having this somewhat technical conversation, but we're also connecting and like we're feeling some pleasant emotions. So I definitely don't feel angry at you right now, right? And so and here's a hint. If I'm talking to you and I'm feeling emotions other than anger or frustration, then that's a sign of a balanced brain.
Okay.
Now what often happens is in relationships is the only in-depth conversations we have are accompanied by resentment, frustration, and anger, which means that those are purely left brain conversations.
Yeah.
So that's a warning sign. So if I was feeling frustrated at you right now, that would be a warning sign, and I'd be like, okay, this conversation is not going to, it's not going to get me what I want. One of the problems is the left brain sees people as objects. So the left brain just does not understand people, and the mistake the left brain always makes is, I can manipulate or control this person, which is not true.
Right.
People will always fight for their freedom. They will always make sure in the end they do not end up getting manipulated, and they will find some sort of creative way to get back at you or to prove that you can't control them.
Yeah.
And the left brain, it's really bad at context, and one of the parts of context it doesn't deal with is memory. And so this idea that if you don't study history, you end up repeating it, well, that's the left brain's story every day, because it doesn't think about the past. It just doesn't care. So the left brain will try the same tactic over and over and over, even after it's failed 100 times, which is something I also see coming up a lot in relationships.
Okay, fascinating. So there's a lot of overlap with nonviolent communication.
Yeah, tell me what you're picking up on.
One really, really important aspect is what we've touched on, which is taking responsibility for our own feelings.
Yeah, I love that principle.
Not just acting out our feelings, like you said, just I'm angry, therefore I'm going to go be destructive.
Sure, yeah.
Right? Or I'm sad, so I'm just going to lie in bed or whatever. But taking responsibility for how we're feeling and being aware of that. And then part of nonviolent communication would be actually revealing that to another person, revealing how you feel. Now, revealing anger, as we mentioned, you can reveal anger, right? But it's not as vulnerable as, say, revealing loneliness, hurt, like that kind of thing.
What you're doing is you're finding the right brain emotion that exists alongside the left brain anger.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's going to be a sense of powerlessness, for example, or I'm feeling hurt. Anger is never alone. There's always something.
Yeah.
Sometimes we talk about primary and secondary. I like the idea of just you have your anger in your left brain, and then what is the right brain feeling? Which is, it's never going to be anger. It's going to be something else. But it's powerlessness, helplessness. I'm not safe. I'm not okay. Or what you were saying, loneliness, something like that.
And so you would describe that more as left brain rather than your amygdala activating and going into some kind of threat response?
I mean, they're probably both true.
Probably both, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the brain is so complex.
Yeah.
I like the left-right because it's a simplification of the complexity of the brain. It's really hard to talk about the brain because, first of all, we don't really know.
Right.
And second of all, what we do know is insanely complex.
Yeah.
And so I use left-right because it helps me have a framework that works. And I guarantee you that what I'm saying is not 100% accurate. So,
it's a simplification.
Yeah, anytime anyone talks about the brain, it's not 100% accurate. We just don't know. And different brains are different.
Right. Yeah. So, another aspect that you mentioned, this is a really important aspect of nonviolent communication, is we never demand anything of anybody. Right? It's all about requests.
Oh, I love that. That's the same word I use. Is I'm like, make a request.
Yeah.
It's a powerful word.
Yeah. Make a request. So
what's the difference between a demand and a request?
So, well, first let me mention the problem with demands.
Okay, sure.
If we make demands and we say, you must do this, or I manipulate you into doing it, saying, if you love me, you will do this, right?
Sure.
If we make demands in that way, we are forcing the other person into a position where they only have two choices. I can either submit or rebel.
Absolutely.
And there is no love in that.
No, there's
right?
not.
There's no generosity. There is no genuine connection, right? And so going around making demands or manipulating people into doing things is not the way to create any kind of genuine connection or secure, loving relationship. No. Right?
There's a few things I see wrong with this. First of all, you make a demand, you're pretending. You're pretending that you actually have the power to make this person do something, which of course you don't.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. You're also pretending that people actually yield to demands, which they don't. Not in the long run. Someone might yield to demand for a short amount of time, and then there's going to be payback.
Yeah,
Every single time.
It never comes for free.
Every parent knows this.
Yes.
And everyone who's ever been in a relationship knows this. And
so,
but this is, and I see this once again as the shortcoming, the lack of insight of the left brain, that the left brain doesn't think about the past, doesn't think about the future. And it's like, aha, I got you to do what I wanted for 5 minutes.
Yes.
I win.
I win, yeah.
And then you lose the next day. But the left brain is like, I really don't care about tomorrow. So.
Yeah. Oh, that short-term thinking gets us into so much trouble in the long term.
Sure.
So the crucial difference between a demand and a request is when I make a request, now I talk about the energy of a request. The energy is you are completely free to say yes or no.
Yeah.
I only want you to say yes if it would bring joy to your life to say yes. And if you say no, you're completely free to say no. And I'm not dangling some carrot or reward if you say yes. I'm not threatening some punishment if you say no. And punishment could be, oh, no, I'm sad because, pouting, sulking.
Absolutely.
It could
That's
be
the most
silent
common
treatment.
kind. It's the most common kind of punishment.
Yeah. Emotional withdrawal, silent treatment, secretly building up resentment against you.
Yeah. I usually categorize the punishment into two categories. It's usually we do both, but it's usually a combination of you didn't do what I want, so now you have to deal with my unpleasant feelings.
Yeah.
And you didn't do what I want, so now I'm going to withdraw my love and affection.
Yes.
So it's like before this thing happened, I was treating you well, I was affectionate, I was kind. Now you didn't do what I want, so now you get no more affection and you do get my nasty emotions.
Yes.
And so it's emotional manipulation.
Exactly. So that's it. So that goes to the purpose of nonviolent communication. Now I'm mixing so much of my own thought process with Marshall Rosenberg's work. But the purpose of nonviolent communication, I'm trying to remember exactly the way Rosenberg put it, which is to communicate in a way that fosters an environment in which natural giving becomes possible, right? It's this environment in which we can connect, and natural giving is possible because I'm giving you the freedom. I'm giving you the freedom to say yes and no. I'm not making you responsible for my emotions. I only want to connect with you if it brings joy to your life, if it makes your life more wonderful to do so. Right?
Cool.
That would be the purpose, right? Now, I'm curious on your thoughts about habitually, when you're walking around outside in the world, what do you think most people have as their purpose when they're communicating? I can tell you what comes to mind for me.
Wow. Okay. I think communication, it's mostly used to try to control people. Okay? And I think secondarily would be, it's part of controlling. So it's mostly used to try to control people, and part of that controlling is I'm trying to control you in a way that you will validate me in some way. But I would think that's, so I think most communication is a way of getting some sort of validation, or trying to feel safe by manipulating my environment, which is, it's fine The left brain is about manipulating the environment, and,
Yeah.
and that's a survival skill. For humans are interesting because like a lot of animals just adapt to the environment. Humans, we don't do that. We change the environment to suit us, and that's a left brain thing. The
Yeah.
left brain is like, oh, here's my environment. What can I do to make it better for me? And so here we are sitting in this room with air conditioning and artificial lighting, right?
Yeah.
Left brain stuff. Like, we made this environment suit us. It's going to be 100 degrees outside today, but we'll be all right. Okay, now the right brain is going to be like, I'm not really focused on manipulating the environment. I'm focused on changing myself so that I can make a positive contribution to the other people here.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different ballgame. And the left brain would never, ever think of what can I change in myself that's going to make things better for everyone, including me. But as it turns out, when people are involved, all my power lies in changing myself.
Yes.
And sometimes I'm going to change myself so that I can become more powerful, so that I can have more influence on other people in a good way. But that still involves me changing myself instead of trying to skip that step and saying, I'm not going to address my own need for growth. I'm just going to talk to you about yours.
Yeah.
Because that's the shortcut that doesn't work.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think most people, like you said, most people are not giving a lot of thought to why am I communicating the way I'm communicating? What am I trying to accomplish? What's my purpose? What's the best way to go about this? I think most people are walking around saying, like, they want to get what they want, and they think getting their point across is the best way to do that, because if I can get my point across, this person, as you put it in terms of controlling another person, yeah, I mean, it's along those lines. It's like, I want this other person to do what I want them to do, whether it's to give me validation, like you said, or provide this whatever good or service that I want, or whatever it is. And one of the shifts we can make, I forget how you put it in right brain thinking, but yeah, it's hey, how can I create an environment where I can connect with another person?
Yeah, sure.
Like, that's a completely different, where we can both enjoy, just an authentic experience together.
One way that I put it is reveal, don't convince.
Yes.
Which is very in line with what you're saying.
Yes.
And so we put a lot of energy into trying to convince other people that my point of view is more valid than your point of view.
Yes.
And that doesn't work.
Yeah.
We keep doing it, but it doesn't work. What does work is, let me tell you about my point of view.
Yeah.
And I am completely fine if you disagree. In fact, I'm actually really interested. For example, I see you as this very intelligent person who has similar passions and interests to me, which is like, what I don't want to do is try to put my point of view onto yours, because then I miss out on learning something from your own different life experience and your own different educational path. For example, studying nonviolent communication. And it's incredibly rewarding to find, say, oh, you came at this from this different angle, and we arrived at somewhat similar conclusions, but not the exact same conclusions. And so my life gets better when I open myself up, to your point of view. Now, it's a lot harder in an intimate relationship, but it's still the right answer. Sometimes, in an intimate relationship, we do face, there's certain things where you do end up having to choose one path, not two.
Yeah.
And so most things we can just disagree on. That's fine.
Yeah.
Some things, someone's not going to get what they want.
True.
Right.
True.
And that's just the reality of relationships. It's one of the harder things to deal with in relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I feel the same way. And for me as a lawyer, one of the things that I find funny is I hate arguing. I hate it. It's like, if I've studied something very in depth and I bring somebody information and I think it's obvious that they should agree with my point of view, I don't want to sit there and have to convince them. Here's the information. You do with it what you want.
Yeah.
And in my marriage, I'm divorced now, as you know, but one of the things that we did well is, so I had a particular political affiliation that was different than my wife's, and neither of us ever tried to pressure each other to change. But slowly over the years, she would ask me, "Oh, what do you think about this?" And I'd say, "Oh yeah, well, this is what I think about that issue and why I think this. And over time, she came to my point of view, and she thanked me and said, hey, you never pressured me to change my point of view, but when you revealed to me your thought process for these things, it made sense to me. And like, now I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you had pressured her, the chances of her changing her mind would be much lower.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. 100%.
We do that all the time. We
Yeah.
work against, I work against my own self-interest in my relationship constantly. It's instinctive and natural. And people get so frustrated. You know, I hear all the time, well, I have to say this over and over and over. I'm like, stop.
Yeah.
Stop saying it over. Like, if you have said it, or they say, well, I don't feel understood. I'm like, no, your partner understands, they disagree. Like, this is very clear. And if I can get someone to shift into their right brain, they immediately see it. Oh, they understand, they disagree. The left brain is like, the only possible explanation for you not agreeing with me is that you don't understand. Because I am so brilliant and right all the time that there is no other possible explanation, that if you understood me, you would, of course, agree. Because that's the only option, because I'm so right. And that's a left brain problem, is it always believes itself. And it's like ChatGPT. ChatGPT, what's the answer to this? If it knows, it knows. If it doesn't know, it pretends. Right? Yeah. And the left brain is just like that. It's like, if it doesn't know, oh, trust me, I know, I'm right. It's always right. The right brain's always like, I'm not sure, which is a much more accurate response to dealing with human beings, because we're never really sure. We're always making guesses with other people.
Yeah. Are some people more naturally right-brained inclined?
Yeah, I mean, there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum, but I think the more important question is that every person within, some people do tend to be more right-brained, some people do, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that every person can shift towards the middle.
Okay.
Or in the context of relationship, we all have to have that left brain active, because we have to modify our environment to suit our needs. Yeah. That is a part of being human, is modifying my environment to suit my needs. That is always not in my interest in a relationship. If I'm trying to modify my environment, that's my partner, to suit my needs, guess who's not going to do that? My partner's not going to do that.
Yeah.
And my wife, if I try to do that, she's just going to push back. Yeah. And she will find a way. It's like what they say in Jurassic Park: life finds a way. That's a good way of saying it. Is that if I'm dealing with a living being, especially a human being, humans are so agentic and so free and so creative, and so sneaky if they need to be. Life finds a way, and the left brain does not believe that. The left brain's like, nope, this person is going to finally fall in line and do what I want, even though they haven't for the last 25 years. But today's the day.
Yeah. So I think there are some ways in nonviolent communication, in the kind of couples work that I do, that we can sometimes dig deeper and find that there actually are misunderstandings that allow people to, I just think of it as in terms of just opening up their compassion to one another.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so one thing, when a couple is locked into this kind of, it feels like an impasse. It feels like they disagree, they're never going to do what I want them to do. Sometimes there is a way to communicate in a way or express something in a way that actually can open one another's heart up to compassion for each other. And reaching into the kind of pain and difficulty that the other person, because imagine if you're the wife who I just want to connect with my husband now, and she comes across and she's like, you never spend time with me, or, she's trying to reach for connection, and he's pulling back saying, what do you mean I never spend time with you, right? Sure. They're both in pain and difficulty in that moment.
But she's trying to modify her environment. That's why it's not working.
Well, yes, she's trying to, and the way she's communicating it is also coming across that way. Mm-hmm. But really, if we reach in and say, in nonviolent communication, it all comes down to needs, right? We all have basic human needs. Sure. You can think of Maslow's hierarchy. You can think of, usually in relationships, we're looking for things like love, connection, closeness, respect. Sometimes we're looking for more of that autonomy. that we feel like our partner's not giving enough autonomy and choice and freedom. So these are the types of things that we're often looking for: trust, respect, if I didn't mention that. And rather than revealing the kind of need, hey, I just feel this need, like, I'm feeling this need for more connection.
Yeah.
And if you come to your partner saying, I'm feeling a need for more connection, I want to connect with you more, it comes across differently.
It is different.
And opens their heart to more compassion, usually, not 100% of the time.
As long as it's not accompanied by any kind of pressure. So I feel a need, and I am not trying to give up my responsibility for taking care of myself.
Yes.
If I say, I do think it's delicate, because if I say to you, I have a need, and I'm not okay, and it's your fault, or as the way one of my coaches once put it, you need to change for me to be okay, right? And that is something that, once again, my partner will never do, because my wife will never accept responsibility for my well-being, because she knows that I'm an adult. She will expect responsibility for our children's well-being, right? She will not put me into that category of someone who is not responsible for their own well-being. And so I can express a need. I would call it a desire, but need is fine. I can express a desire as long as I don't abdicate my responsibility for caring for myself. And so there's certain things, dear wife, there are things that you could offer me that would be really meaningful to me.
Yeah.
And I know that you have a choice, and I'm going to be okay. And so I am not putting my well-being into your hands. I'm just making a request.
Yes, I agree. And Dr. Rosenberg would approve of really, often when we are trying to make a request, people are so used to hearing demands and being controlled and manipulated in their life that even when you're trying to make a request, they will still hear it as a demand.
Yeah.
And so doing something like you just did, saying, dear wife, I am not putting this into your hands, I'm just making a request.
Yeah.
Prefacing it in that way can be very helpful.
Sure.
So this gets to probably the core pain that led me into relationship work. I want to get your thoughts on this. I notice in relationships, it's not gender, it's not men and women, it's whatever it is, it's some people versus other people are different. Some people, when somebody is asking them for whatever would make them feel loved, we can quibble about the words I'm using. Anyway, somebody says, hey, my love language is quality time. I'm asking somebody for quality time.
Sure.
Whatever.
You're making a request.
They're making a request.
Yeah.
Now, some people experience this resistance. Some people are more inclined to feel pressured and more inclined to feel controlled or smothered or whatever. And they will say, whoa, I don't want to meet your need. Other people are so much more willing to, you have a need? Let me come and meet your need. That would just bring me so much joy. Sure. And I will also feel so much connection and pleasure out of being able to be close to you in that way. Now, I've had my experience in life, and I see it in lots of couples that I work with. With people who do feel very pressured by somebody asking them for love, I would personally encourage them, hey, try to relax, because it's not so threatening when somebody is asking you to do something for them. That comes up in a lot of your work and a lot of what you talk about. Do you have a reaction to that?
No, I think it's great. Yeah, I talk about it often as there's a spectrum. So I have historically, well, I have a pretty anxious attachment pattern. My wife is avoidant, right? Yeah. And so this aligns pretty closely to what you're talking about. When I feel anxious, my instinct is to go to her for comfort. When she feels anxious, her instinct is to take solitude for comfort. She wants to go away from me. Yeah. And so we end up chasing each other. Now, we have dealt with this and we've come to the middle. But for about 20 years, it was severe, where I was severely anxious, very needy. And in my mind, the only solution to my distress was connection with her. And in her mind, the only solution to her distress was disconnection from me.
Yeah.
And so that creates a very difficult scenario. So yeah, I would tell an avoidant partner, which is kind of what you're describing, that same thing, is that your work is to calm yourself down and offer connection to your partner. But I would say the same thing to the anxious partner. Your work is to calm yourself down first and offer not anxious connection to your partner.
Right.
And so just because you feel like you want to connect, what you're actually doing is you're like, hey, dear wife, can I come dump all my anxiety on you?
Right.
Won't that be nice? No, it's not nice. And we frame it, I did, and I framed it as love for 20. I just love you so much.
Right.
I mean, it's complete nonsense.
Right.
There's no love involved in that. You know, I was reaching out. I had nothing to offer.
Right.
So love is given and never taken.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was trying to take and calling it love, but it's not. It's extraction.
Right.
And so I really did have to learn to comfort myself, soothe myself, calm myself down, take care of my own person, and then actually have something to offer.
Yeah.
And she had to work on not running away.
Yeah.
So that was an incredibly difficult thing for us to work through.
Yeah.
So you can trace that often to parental involvement in early childhood. So I come from a pretty neglectful family, and she comes from a family with a very overbearing parent. Mm-hmm. So she had reasons to develop that kind of response. I had reasons to develop that kind of response.
Right.
And those two, the anxious and the avoidant, always end up together because there's a compatibility there.
Right.
But it also leads to a very painful dynamic system.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I see the same thing. And on a very practical level, when somebody is experiencing that anxiety and thinking of it as I want to love and connect with this person, it's very helpful to pause and say, wait a second. What actually am I seeking out of this interaction? I'm feeling anxious. I want them to take care of my anxiety and make me feel better.
Yeah.
That frames it when you realize what you're actually doing in that situation.
Yeah. Don't call it love. Don't call it love when it's not love.
Don't call it love, right? Yeah. I'm asking for something in that situation, and
that's fine if it's occasional. If it happens every day, no one's going to sign up for that.
Yeah.
Not in the long run. And so, it's the kind of thing when we first fall in love, there's so much intensity in the relationship that all of these underlying dynamics get overpowered. Mm-hmm. But then, as the relationship matures, things like an anxious avoidant dynamic take center stage, and they become really unpleasant.
Right.
And the key is for me to be willing to deal with my half.
Yeah.
And to allow my wife the freedom to either deal with her half or not deal with it. There's a central issue here, which is when I deal with my half, it makes it 10 times easier for her to deal with hers.
Yeah.
So I can do her a huge favor and myself a huge favor by dealing with what's going on in me, which then it's really hard to describe, but if I'm doing something that's harmful to the relationship and I stop, it becomes so much easier for my partner to do the same.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm making them change, it's that I'm allowing them to change. It's that's not even accurate. It's I'm enabling the change to happen by dealing with my own part in the dysfunction.
Yeah. You're fostering an environment in which it's much more likely to happen, for sure.
And so coming back to the left-right idea, the left brain is always like, I will directly modify my environment, which works great with physical. Like if we want to move these couches, we can move the couches. If I want to move my partner, I cannot move my partner.
No.
So if I want my partner to move, which we all do, guess what I have to do? I have to move myself first. And so, if she's sitting here and I want her to sit here, well, if I move myself in the room, maybe I come and sit over here. I don't make her move. I just come over and sit over here. And I don't know how well this metaphor is going to work out. That makes it possible, or not possible, it makes it more likely, makes it easier for her to decide to come sit over here if she wants to.
Right.
Now, if she feels like I'm trying to coerce her to come sit over here, she's not going to do it. Because she will fight for her freedom to the death.
Yeah.
That's what people do.
Yeah, I'm thinking about so many different concepts right now. There's so many different ways we could go in this conversation.
I have an idea.
Okay.
So I had a conversation with one of my sisters yesterday, and my sister is of the opinion that this is a way. So I practice what's called crucible therapy.
Yes.
And one of the core ideas in crucible therapy is mind mapping, the idea that human beings have most human beings have a very well-developed ability to understand what's going on in another person's brain. So just me, with sitting with you here, I have a decent read on how you feel, what you want, what your purposes are, and what you're thinking, right? To a certain extent. Now, you and I don't know each other that well, and so, my read on you is somewhat limited. But with my wife, who I've lived with for 24 years, I know her really well, and my ability to read her is much better. So in a relationship, there's a lot of mind mapping going back and forth. And so that's my opinion. In fact, I think that my ability, I know more about what's going on inside my wife than she does, and vice versa. And so in a relationship, there's this really powerful thing that I can do where I can allow her to talk to me about what she thinks is happening inside me, especially about what she thinks my intentions are, things that I might not know about myself that she's going to see more clearly. Now, that obviously takes a lot of courage. Now, my sister had a different opinion. She says, I don't see things that way. She says, I think that what you're doing is you're projecting yourself onto your wife, this is a more traditional view in psychology, that anything I think about you, Daniel, is just me projecting, and anything you think about me is projecting. And that actually what she says, she's like, no, my introspection, my ability to know myself is very, very highly developed. I'm really good at knowing myself, and there's no way you could possibly know what I'm doing. So we had very different points of view on this, and I'm curious what you think.
This is another one of two things can be true.
Sure.
Right, I think. And yeah, I mean, to make it practical, the way I would approach this probably with somebody is first I might even ask somebody for consent. Can I tell you what I feel like I'm picking up from you, right? Because
that's a really good way to start, yeah.
So, because it can feel very intrusive to people. It feels violating to people.
I've had that response from people like, don't talk to me, don't tell me what I'm feeling. You know? It does, and it's not a thing that's common in our culture. Yeah. It's an uncommon thing to do.
Right. Well, people don't talk a whole lot about what they're feeling anyway. But yeah, when you do, so there's two possible problems. One is violating somebody by being too intrusive. Now, some people are more perceptive than others, right? Yeah, and because you and I are interested in psychology, we might be more aware of what's going on inside other people than somebody else would be. And so that's one aspect, starting by asking for consent. The other thing would be, just on a practical level again, just asking, are you feeling this way? And always having it as a question.
But the problem with that is that I do think that especially with me and my wife, I wouldn't ask her that because I don't think that her ability to read herself is better than my ability to read her. And so it's almost like that question starts with an assumption that her self-mapping is better than my map of her, which I think is generally not the case. I do think that our eyes face outward, and we're better at, to the extent that I know someone, I'm better at reading that person than I'm at reading. Mapping myself or tracking myself is actually quite difficult. That's the way. Now I realize that you're coming from a different angle, but the way I see it is I wouldn't ask for confirmation. I would just say, hey, this is what I see in you, realizing that you might disagree. And I'm not, once again, it's a reveal, don't convince. Let me reveal to you my map of you. Yeah. And I understand that you might see it differently, and that's okay. But it still increases the intimacy between us. And I did this with my sister when I was talking to her. I was like, because she was talking about a map she has of herself. And I said, just so you know, that's not how I see you. And that really set her back, because that's what led to this whole conversation. Because she's like, well, how could you possibly see me? People can't see each other. So she has a very different view on this than I do. And I said, actually, I think that we see each other, like she and I grew up together. She's only 18 months younger than me. Yeah. And I was like, we know each other pretty well. We've known each other for a long time. And I think that in general, people who have that kind of a connection are better at reading each other than they are at reading themselves.
I do take this as a both and.
Yeah, sure.
Because for a lot of us are much more self-reflective than others. And so more self-reflective people are going to have, I think you have access through more and more self-reflection to what is going on inside of you than, for example, your wife does.
Absolutely. Well, ooh. I think I can learn to track myself better.
Yeah.
I doubt. Okay, I guess I can imagine a scenario if my wife was not developing. My wife's also a therapist, and
Right.
she's incredibly perceptive. And
Okay.
so, in my case, I don't think this is ever going to happen for me.
Okay.
But I can imagine a scenario if I were married to someone who was not working on her powers of perception and was
Yes.
not able to settle down. Maybe someone who did project a lot or was, whatever,
Yes.
not willing to really settle down and take a hard look at something. I could see that being a case, but I don't think it's the case for most couples.
Yeah, so interesting. The way I think about this is I generally regard each individual as having more awareness of themselves than somebody else does.
Yeah.
Now, I could be wrong about that.
But that is the predominant view. So, see, it doesn't surprise me you see things. That's why I wanted to bring this up, because I'm curious what you think.
That's very interesting. That's the way I see it, but I could be wrong about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, the other thing is, regardless of whether that's true or not, I consider each person to be the ultimate authority of. So, if I'm talking to somebody and I'm like, I think you're angry, and they say they're not angry, well, there's another tricky situation, because it may be the fact that they are in denial that they're not angry or just not aware.
Yeah.
But if they say, the way I will treat them out of respect and for their dignity as a human being, I would probably treat them, if they say, hey, this thing, when my dad hit me as a kid, it didn't hurt me. Mm-hmm. If a man says, when my dad hit me as a kid, it didn't hurt me.
Sure.
Out of respect for his dignity and autonomy as an individual, I might believe that he actually was hurt and is somehow in denial. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to say, okay, you get to be the ultimate authority of whether that's true for you.
That feels deceptive to me.
Well, I mean, I might tell him what I think, but I'm going to be respectful. Sure. I don't know. I'm open to.
No, yeah, it's interesting. I had a therapy supervisor once tell me that she would tell couples, if your partner tells you how they're feeling, then believe them, and that's not. Yeah, I often tell couples the opposite. So they will often come in here and they will say, well, I'll say, well, what is your partner feeling? And they'll turn and say, well, what are you feeling? I'm like, no. I'm like, you know. And I'm trying to get you to trust your own map of your partner.
Yeah.
And part of the reason is that, the person who says he's not angry, he could be making a move. Anger is not considered to be valid emotion in a lot of places. And so maybe he's saying, well, it's not okay for me to be angry.
Right.
And this is something that I do a lot where anger even. I used to claim that I was never angry. Uh-huh. And I was really good at hiding it, but I was actually angry.
I relate to that.
I was actually angry all the time.
Yeah.
I hid anger, but I hid all my emotions. I wore a very wooden mask. And so I would go around claiming I never got angry. What was more true was that I never got not angry. I was just angry all the time, and I never showed it. Hardly ever. But I was still angry. I never really thought of it that way. It kind of took me to get to the point of having whole days without anger for me to realize how angry I used to be. Because I used to be just pissed off all the time. So.
Yeah. My own experience, my anger was so repressed that I didn't feel it.
But it was always there, probably.
I don't know.
I'm guessing. I don't really know.
My own experience, I have been angry at times. Anyway, the most important thing was that I didn't know how to communicate my emotions. I didn't know how to communicate what I was feeling and take responsibility for what I was feeling. Yeah. There was a huge lack of awareness there. In general, my general experience is not much anger, for the most part.
Yeah.
But
I can see that in you. You've never seemed like an angry person. Okay, so talking about sharing feelings, communicating emotions. What I tell couples is you have left brain emotions and right brain emotions. So frustration, anger, resentment are left brain emotions.
Okay.
And I'm like, there is very little utility to communicating your left brain emotions. Okay. And if you have a right brain emotion, which is all of the others, then those are much more useful. But what I see couples doing when they're communicating their emotions is they're communicating their anger, frustration, resentment.
Right.
And
Yes.
the problem with that is
Yes.
that those are emotions that are designed to control the environment. They're designed
Yes.
to, it's a way of taking action and changing the environment. It comes from this idea, my environment is not suitable for me, and it's to an extreme. My
Yes.
environment is extremely not suitable for me to the extent that I'm angry now, or I'm resentful, or I'm frustrated. And so it's like, I'm going to do something to change the environment. But when we direct that at a person,
Yeah.
like if I were locked in a prison cell and I got mad at the prison door to the extent that I broke it down, then
Yeah.
I would have modified my environment to suit me. And that would be a decent use of anger, right? As long as I didn't like break myself in the process. If I direct that anger towards a person, it always is destructive.
Yeah. You and I think about this slightly differently, but there's a big piece of overlap here. I think about most of our emotions are connected with some thought. So I like to think about what is the thought that's going on. Anger, frustration, resentment usually involves some thought that involves some kind of blaming, right?
Yes,
Some
absolutely.
externalizing and blaming. Something else is responsible for the way I feel, why I feel
Yes.
this way. And yeah, so to put this in nonviolent communication terms, Rosenberg would say, every time we say I feel, we always say because I have a need for, and fill in the need that we have. So this is kind of an interesting way.
So you're putting some thought into what might be leading to your feeling. So you're not just sharing a feeling without explanation, it's a feeling with explanation. That's interesting. So you're doing some of the work.
Yes, and the point is it causes us that phrase, because I have a need for, causes us to reflect, to be conscious of the fact that it's this feeling that I'm having is coming from something in me, right? So it's causing us to turn inward and take responsibility for why we have this feeling.
Yeah.
I'm feeling angry because I have a need for trust, respect, whatever it is, autonomy. I'm angry because you're trying to control me right now.
Yeah.
Or I'm right. But we don't say...
Because I have a need for autonomy, right? And so... It's interesting because the second one is like, you're trying to control me, but now I'm blaming you for what I feel. As opposed to, what is my role in not being autonomous? If I were being more autonomous, if I were being more agentic, if I was taking more responsibility for my own choices instead of blaming them on you, then I wouldn't be so angry.
Exactly. So the phrase, because you are trying to control me, is jackal speak.
Yeah.
That's jackal, that's blaming.
It's an oversimplification. Because it's skipping a step of like, you're trying to control me and I'm allowing it, right? Because there's part of that, right? Because if you try to control me and it's not working, then I'm not going to be so angry, because lots of people try to control you. You know, the guy who honks at you on the freeway, he's trying to control you.
Yeah.
But if you don't allow yourself to be controlled, you're not going to be as angry.
Yeah. So there are multiple things going on in that scenario, and so I feel angry because I have a need for autonomy.
Yes.
Okay, that would be good. So then the next step would be to make the request.
Yeah, sure.
So make the request. Now, it's also very unclear what you mean if I say, will you please stop trying to control me? That's a very unclear...
Be more precise.
Yeah, let's be precise.
Sure.
So will you please not honk at me?
Yeah.
Now that is actually doable and clear. And then if they continue to honk, then we can still take more autonomy, more responsibility for our own actions by saying, if you continue to honk, I'm going to go, to this location, right? I'm going to go to a different location.
One way that I frame it sometimes is I tell people to express their perception and their preference. And so in this instance, if my partner's trying to control me, you could say, my perception is that you withdrew your love and affection from me after we disagreed yesterday. Okay, so that's my perception.
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
They will probably have a different perception. That's fine. I'm only sharing mine. I'm not trying to convince you.
Yes.
I'm not saying mine's better than yours. This is how I see you. Okay.
Yes.
Now, you can either leave it there.
Yes.
That's often fine. I can also add a preference. The preference in this case is kind of obvious, so you don't necessarily have to say it. I'd prefer that you not do that.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. And there's almost a gift in that, which is like, if you don't change your behavior, I'm still going to be okay. Right?
Yeah.
My well-being is not your responsibility. What is my responsibility is to treat you well.
Mm-hmm.
And part of treating you well is, let me reveal to you how I see you and what I want from you.
Yeah.
And chances are, my partner probably knows a lot of this already, but there's still a little bit of power in me being willing to say it.
Mm-hmm.
And just saying it goes a long ways to, I'm taking care of myself, and because I'm taking care of myself, I'm going to be okay. Because I'm okay, I don't need to be angry. Because I've already solved the problems here. And most relationship problems they're just not as horrendous as they seem.
Sure.
In the moment.
Right.
If you zoom out, look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
I felt just, for 20 years of my marriage, absolutely miserable. Like,
Yeah.
I felt so victimized and so put upon, and none of that was very accurate. I was actually okay the whole time, and there were things that I wanted that I wasn't getting, but there was so much that I could have done on my side to make things better.
Yeah.
That I didn't know how to do, and I didn't.
Yeah. So, yeah, I love the phrase, it's my perception that.
Yes.
There's other ways.
There's lots of ways to see it.
There's lots of ways.
Yeah.
It seemed to me
it's
as
like what I told my sister yesterday. I'm like, just so you know, that's not how I see you.
Yeah.
She was she was saying, this is how I see myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree that she sees herself that way. And I said, just so you know, that's not how I see you. And so I'm already establishing, you have your perception, I have mine. That's okay. And I did feel in the moment it was pretty important for me to say, just so you know, my perception is different than yours. I could have also not said that. And so there's a judgment involved in, like, when is it worth revealing a perception that's going to be unpleasant for the person who hears it?
Yeah. So, in coaching, one of the things that we always do is ask for permission before we coach, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so, because walking around, you have the opportunity to coach people all the time, and most of the time you just respect that they're not asking you for your coaching. So, we can ask, would you like to hear my thoughts about that, right?
That's so interesting. Would you like to hear my thoughts?
Would you like to hear my perception? Oh, I have a little bit of a different take on that. Would you like to hear? But that's okay. The phrase I would prefer, very nonviolent communication phrase, recognizing our preferences, which is most of what the conflicts in our relationships are about, is mostly about different preferences.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
People, this is one of the reasons why in nonviolent communication we express our needs, because people can understand needs, relate based on needs. Nobody argues. You shouldn't have a need for connection. People might argue. You shouldn't have a need for respect.
But it makes sense. It's a reasonable request.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but just saying my need is for respect. Okay, that's valid. I can also relate to having a need for respect. Now, or love. If I say I have a need for love, you probably wouldn't argue with me and say, well, you shouldn't have a need for love. You could relate to the need for love. Now, if I start to say, in order to meet my need for love, you have to come golfing with me on Saturday.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's where the conflicts happen. Actually, you don't need to come golfing on Saturday for me to feel loved, to get my need met. That's my preference.
Turn it into a request.
That's my preference.
I often tell people to take their complaint and turn it into a request, because there's a lot of complaints.
Yes.
You never do this. You always do this. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
The complaint is focused on the past. The interesting thing about talking to someone about the past is they can't do anything about the past, right?
Yeah.
Okay, forget about the past. I bet there's something that you would like this person to do in the future. Can you make that into a really friendly request?
Yeah.
Recognize them that they don't have to say yes, and that you're going to be okay if they don't say yes, because you're going to figure out how to take care of yourself. And it's a huge shift. But now I can, like if I go to In-N-Out and I say, you guys always make sucky burgers, I hate your hamburgers, you make the worst hamburgers in the world.
Right.
I'm not going to get a very good burger. Right?
right.
If I go and I say, can I please have a double-double with extra pickles? Mm-hmm. I'd probably get a pretty good burger.
Yeah.
But we don't do that in relationships.
Right.
We always go into like, your hamburgers suck.
Yeah.
And then we don't get what we want.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of the negativity bias. Would you say that's left brain? Is that what's happening? I don't know.
It could be. Yeah, I don't know. I had never thought about that.
That's okay.
We found something that might not be left brain. This is awesome.
There you go. So, the brain is complex, remember?
It is so complex.
Okay, so, all right, here's another element of nonviolent communication that, so, I'm a big fan of communicating, it's my perception that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like that way of communicating. Sure. Nonviolent communication adds another element to this that is, I think, a good discipline, but it's very challenging and most people aren't very good at it. Here's the element. In nonviolent communication, what you would do is separate your observations from your analysis. The analysis is the judgment, the conclusions.
Yeah.
Right? So he left a sock on the floor is an observation. It's something that I can see, taste, touch, hear, feel, like right with my sense perceptions. It's kind of an indisputable fact, although it is kind of disputable in a way. Right? Our perceptions can be different. But the analysis or conclusion that somebody often draws is, you are a slob, you don't care about this house, you don't respect me, like all these kinds of conclusions people draw because you left your sock on the floor rather than putting it in the laundry hamper. So, in nonviolent communication, you wouldn't say, it's my perception that, so I wouldn't say, it's my perception that you don't value having a tidy house.
Mm-hmm. No, because that's a judgment.
That's a judgment. Yeah. So, is it wrong? I'm saying it's my perception. Like
you can just say, I judge that.
Yeah.
So I go to a Mankind Project men's group, and in Mankind we have a tradition. If you say judgment, you say, I judge that. And you just, it probably comes from NBC, honestly, I don't know. But if I'm going to tell judgment, I can say, I judge that. And it's a beautiful way of just saying, hey, this is my judgment. Yeah. Which is very different than I perceive that. Yeah. Yeah, because a judgment goes into, I'm going to tell you something more than what I see with my eyes. Yes. Yeah. Which we do constantly. All the time. Our brains constantly evaluate information and turn it into conclusions automatically, effortlessly, and almost instantaneously. Absolutely. Right? Yeah. And so many people are not aware that they're going around making judgments constantly. When somebody cuts you off on the freeway, that person is a bad driver, judgment. That happens so quickly. Oh, instantly. And saying, oh, that person merged. That person merged. That person cut me off. I mean, even that, this driver pulled in front of me with 10 yards of space. Exactly. There a perception. You go. That's right? A perception that is also an observation. Say, this person pulled in front of me in a more aggressive way than I would have done it. That's true. That's you're getting close to a judgment there, but it's still, but it can be okay. Yeah. If the person is an idiot, that's no longer okay. Yeah. Yeah. So the thing about judgments is we make judgments all the time, and the problem is that they often lead to disconnection in relationships. Absolutely. Right. And that if we express our judgments, it would be very natural and human for the other person to respond negatively to that with some form of either aggression or defensiveness. Right? Because if we're expressing a judgment, we're implying wrongness in the other person. And one thing that nobody wants is to be wrong. No. So in NVC, we would take care to pay attention to observations and try to only communicate observations without judgments. Sure. Not saying judgments are wrong, not saying that we should avoid them, But they're of limited utility.
Yes.
One thing I talk to people, this is similar. I talk to people like it's okay to hurt your partner's feelings, but make sure you have a really good reason for doing that. And so if I'm going to say something to you that's going to hurt you, I need to weigh the cost of that, right? Because what happens a lot in a relationship is I'm going to say something that hurts you, and there's no value added from that. I'm just basically trying to hurt you, you know?
Sure.
And now, if there's something really important that I need to say to my wife that's going to be unpleasant for her to hear, what I will usually do is write it down the night before and then look at it the next day and be like, okay, is this worth it? You know?
Yeah.
And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But if I make that split-second decision, that's not enough time to evaluate something like that.
Yeah.
You know? If I'm going to hurt someone's feelings, I better have a good reason for that.
Yeah.
And I don't tell people to avoid it. The right answer is not to avoid hurting people's feelings. The right answer is to ask yourself, why?
Yeah.
What is this for? What is the benefit of doing this, and does it outweigh the cost? And that's a hard thing to think about, and you need some time for that. And it's rarely so critical that I have to say it right now. It's usually very often it's better left to the next day after I've given it some thought.
Yeah.
Slow everything down.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how this would come up in NVC.
Because I'm sure NVC has room for saying something that might be hurtful to someone.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, so the way I think about it in my own coaching is it's important to be honest and kind. Like, we want to be truthful and compassionate, right? And so some people go way too far to one end where I don't want to say anything that will hurt other people's feelings, therefore they sacrifice the honesty.
Yes.
Other people ramp up the honesty and sacrifice the kindness, so they think, oh, I'm just going to be blunt all the time.
Sure.
Right? And it doesn't matter how it affects other people.
This is a trap I've fallen into.
Yeah.
So I am, over the past, I would say year, I've been moving more and more towards being gentler as a therapist. Without sacrificing honesty. And that takes, a lot of times that you deal with two things that seem to be oppositional, like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And there actually is a third way of having both, but it takes a lot of practice.
Yeah.
And so what I've been working on is, can I figure out how to tell you what's true in an even kinder and gentler way.
Yeah.
In a softer way.
Yeah.
And I actually had there's specific clients where I have gotten combative with them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've gotten combative with each other. So it's hard for me specifically to handle male clients who get combative with me. It's really easy for me to start sparring. And that never works.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing them any favors, because part of my job is I'm going to demonstrate to you a better way to handle conflict.
Yeah.
But then I wasn't doing that. And so if you're going to step into conflict with me, it's not really good for me to just yield, right?
Yeah.
Because that's not doing you any favors.
Right.
I want to show you, can I show you a way of talking straight to a person, and you're going to know at every second in that conversation that I'm on your side, even as I tell you things you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to move towards.
Yeah.
And what I find myself doing is when I fail, so when I write notes after a session, I'll write my session notes, and then I'll write my journal, which is about me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this is what I did. This is where I got combative. This is where in Crucible Therapy, we call it holding a collaborative alliance.
Yes.
Which is, collaborative alliance is, I'm on your side.
Yes.
And I'm telling you the truth.
Yes.
Okay? And so I will write in my journal, I'm like, okay, this is where I was holding on to my collaborative alliance. This is where I dropped it.
Yeah.
And I'll go to the next session. I'm like, I want to talk to you about where I dropped my collaborative alliance last
Yes.
session. Because part of me being on your side is like, I'm not going to pretend that I was on your side when I wasn't. Because
Yes.
now I'm just being deceptive.
Yes.
And so
yeah,
it's something that, I see it as a multi-year project, but
yes.
the best therapists and coaches, counselors I know are all capable of this. And so I just think it's the only way for me to get good at what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first part of what you said about is it okay to communicate in a way that ends up hurting somebody else's feelings?
Yeah.
And when is that? And have a good reason for it. I think that in a way you could see the entire framework of nonviolent communication seeks to address that by getting extreme clarity on what's my responsibility and what's your responsibility. So my responsibility is to own my own feelings, to own my own needs, to take responsibility for those, to focus on my observations and be aware of when I'm making judgments. I take responsibility for all of that. It's okay for me as well to not accept treatment that hurts me without responding to that.
Sure.
So how can I respond to that in a kind way? Well, I can state an observation that's pretty close to objective reality, like you left a sock on the floor, or you, right? And kind of expect the other person to take responsibility for that. That's a fact, right? And so if it hurts them to hear that, or if it hurts them to hear that I feel sad when I don't get to spend time with them on the weekend, then all I'm doing is expressing myself, and they need to take responsibility for whatever that brings up within them, right? Because I'm not doing anything, right? So drawing those lines is very challenging. Studying NVC, part of the entire task is defining what's my responsibility and what's somebody else's.
It's a good place to start from.
Yeah. So the other piece that you brought up was the collaboration. So so in an NVC approach, I think we would say, hey, can we have a conversation? We would kind of identify our needs and identify their needs. Could we have a conversation about a solution that could meet my need for connection while also respecting your need for space?
Yeah.
Like honoring both needs at once, right? Opening up a conversation in that way.
It's pretty hard to do that. But that is the only way.
Yeah, I mean,
it's hard to do it in a relationship. It's hard to do it in an intimate relationship. So like, my wife and I still struggle to have collaborative conversations, even after many years of therapy and us both being therapists. And she and I have devoted ourselves quite seriously to the work of learning how to do these things. And she's still the hardest person for me to talk to about intimate things, about difficult questions. And so, if we are trying to move something in our marriage, that's still very challenging conversation. I just think it's like that for everybody. I just think that's the way it is.
It's interesting. I mean, for me, maybe it's built into my personality. Collaboration just like brings me joy. What makes it hard?
Oh well, I get regressed, so I get defensive.
Yeah.
My brain tanks, her brain tanks. I think it triggers a lot of difficulties from childhood, and so, every adult comes from a place where they were powerless as a child, and depending on what kind of family you grew up in, that powerlessness would have been exploited to a certain extent, and so, the one relationship that tends to trigger those memories most is marriage.
Sure.
And so, yeah, the one person that I it's hardest for me to hold on to myself around is my wife. Not most of the time, because we're actually really friendly with each other. But if we're talking about a difficult subject, and we really do, we know all the tricks, we do all the things, and it's still hard. I think it is innately challenging. One way I often express this is that the average human brain is not capable of having a happy marriage.
Sure. Yeah, and we're not. Our brains are not designed for happy marriage.
Right. And there's plenty of statistics that show that.
Yeah.
And so, I just look at it as like, this is just what it is to be married. That, there's people who run 100-mile races. There's people who climb huge mountains. There's people who lift very heavy weights, and there's people who have happy marriages. And all of those people worked really hard to get what they have. And so, for me, I don't really care about running 100 miles, but I do care about having a happy marriage.
Yes.
And I'm willing to do the work to get there.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who runs 100-mile races, and he puts in so much effort to do that. And I often just ask myself, I'm like, if this is the equivalent of running 100 miles, am I willing to do what it takes?
Yeah.
He can't just show up on race day and say, okay, I'll go run my 100 miles. He's going to make it 20, maybe, you know? And I can't just show up to my marriage and say, well, obviously I'm going to have a good marriage. No, that's not how it works. You know, you got to really be willing to. My brain is not naturally cut out to be a good husband. And so I can become a good husband just like my friend can become an amazing ultra runner. If he really wants to.
I totally agree. Our brains were not designed for long-term, sustaining, fulfilling relationships.
But they can become that.
Yeah, we can. We have the capability.
Yeah. And for many people like me, this is what I care about.
Yeah.
I care about it so much, and I'm willing to do what it takes to get there.
Yeah.
And it comes back to in my brain. My left brain is going to like modify the environment, and that is not the answer. The environment, my wife, does not want to be modified.
Right.
And the real answer is coming into the right brain, which is change myself.
So if you're in one of those conversations, you're trying to collaborate and it's difficult. You mentioned regressing. Do you think there's a fear that your needs are not going to get met, or a fear that you're going to be controlled?
Sure. Yeah.
Is that
both of those? Yeah, and it's a fear that is rooted in the past, not the present. The fact is, realistically, I have very little to fear from my wife.
Yeah.
Realistically. Now, my brain tends to see things differently.
Yeah.
And so that's just a common thing that happens. You know, you can explain it in terms of attachment theory. It's like, this is my attachment figure now. Yeah. There were many, many times in childhood when my attachment figure did not meet my needs, to use that language.
Yeah.
Children, I do feel more comfortable talking about a child's needs than an adult's needs. I would say a desire, but for an adult. But in childhood, I think it is fine to call it a need, and it would not have been reasonable for me to expect as a child that my needs would be met on a daily basis, and that wiring carries on into adulthood.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen my brain change. Mm-hmm. You know, so I've had this rare opportunity of falling in love for the second time with the same woman, which is a pretty rare thing. But our path is still going to be very long. Yeah. So, I just, you know, David Schnarch says, marriage is a people-growing machine. Yeah. And that is very much how I see it. And it's also, you know, there's tons of comfort and pleasure and, you know, a safe place and someone who has your back. But more than anything, it's a people-growing machine. Yeah. Like a 100-mile race. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel the same way about relationships. I have a client right now, and I was asking him, like, he's married, and I said, what's the purpose of marriage? And he's like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And he said, well, companionship and having a family together. Sure. And I said, okay. And I'm like, what about making you a better person? And I'm not saying anybody has to have that point of view, but I think because of my religious upbringing, that was a belief I developed, is that, this is a type of relationship that refines us. Mm. So I have one concept that I think might be a good ending concept. Yeah. We've spent most of this time talking about how to communicate in a way that expresses ourselves. And the reason we want to do that is so that we can have genuine relationships with people that are built on generosity rather than demands and rewards and punishments or any of that type of manipulation. Mm. So that's all good. The other element that we haven't really talked about yet is listening and how to listen, which is the conversation that led to us deciding to record the podcast. Yeah. So the way this comes up, if we talk about jackal speak being speak that makes other people responsible for our emotions and is focused on our evaluations of other people, and giraffe being focusing on communicating what's alive in us, communicating requests rather than any kind of demands. and communicating in a way that's also curious about what's alive in other people. What happens when our partner comes to us with some kind of criticism or judgment of us or complaint? So we could tell our partner, you need to learn to communicate better.
That is one option.
Which would be a jackal thing to say.
Yeah.
And the other, another option that we have would be to put on our giraffe ears and to hear as a giraffe would hear, which is when somebody comes to you saying, you're selfish, you only care about yourself, is to listen for the feeling and the need and the request that they're not saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Even, and along with that, that is an interesting way of trying to feeling need in the request. I actually really like that because it forces me to think about why did this person say the thing, especially in the context of what if, say, my wife says something to me and say she's really angry and she says she's mean. She says something and she's aggressive about it. And it's so easy for me to dismiss. She's just, why would I listen to such drivel? Okay. But a better way for me to think is, you can do your way for the need, the request, the feeling. That's useful. One way that my therapist talks to me about it is she says, what is the most important part of what your wife just said?
Yeah.
What is the central, which gets you to the same place. But it's like, step back, take a minute, think, why did she even say this thing? And could she have said it better? Yes, of course. Fine, whatever. She said it, so can you grow up enough to actually pay attention to what she's saying instead of just being so judgmental about how she said it? A third way that I think about it is, which I talked to you yesterday about, is take out the screw you. And so if someone says something to me and they're like, you need to change this and screw you, because they're being angry, and I get all up in arms about the screw you part, that doesn't do me any favors. And so I can be like, okay, you need to change this and screw you. If I take off the screw you and I just look at you need to change this part, there's value in there, right?
Yes.
Now, sometimes people are just out to get you and they're just saying whatever's going to hurt you. Fine. But not all the time.
Yeah.
And so sometimes my wife is just out to get me, but not all the time. And if I throw away everything she says, because sometimes she's just out to get me, then I'm losing really, really valuable feedback. And she's telling me about things that I do not know about myself, but she does, and that they're hard for her to express to me. And there's several reasons for that, but it's really hard to tell someone you love about the worst parts of themselves. It's hard to see it, it's hard to say it, it's hard to deal with the conversation. It's easier to just not do it, or to do it in a very angry and hurtful way. But to do what we're talking about today is like, can I tell you about the worst parts of yourself in a collaborative way? That's actually really difficult. And so when someone makes a 50% effort, man, you better listen.
Yeah.
Because there's so few people in the world who can actually really do, do all the nonviolent, the NVC
Sure.
thing. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. And
Yes.
so I will try to do that in myself.
Yes.
And
Yes.
when my wife makes an effort to talk straight to me,
Yes.
it really is important that I listen.
Yes.
One thing that I have done in the past, we had an argument a couple weeks ago, and she actually wrote up she wrote up the script of the argument.
Yes.
What she remembered, and she sent it to our therapist, and we talked about it. And the therapist said, James, go into the script and write down, identify and name every single move you made in the script.
Okay.
And there's like 17 of them, and it was like a 2-minute argument.
Like chess moves, like you were.
Yeah,
like
chess moves. She's
Yeah.
like, okay, when so I would just go in and I a different color font, and like after I said this, I'm like, I was trying to back her off, and then the next one I was like, I was trying to make it seem like she was asking for something unreasonable.
Yeah.
Or and in this one I was like, I was trying to make it seem like she was talking about the words I was saying instead of the thing that I meant by the words, right?
Oh, that would make me angry if you did that to me.
Oh, it did make her angry.
Yeah.
but these are things, I has a groove in my brain. It's a mile deep, and it goes into all these moves.
Yeah.
And Unfortunately, I'm really good at them. You know, my wife and I barely talked about relationship for 20 years. And part of the reason, I used to always just blame her. She would refuse to talk to me, which is unfortunate. But I'm also really hard to talk to when I don't handle myself well. And I'm very fast, I'm very agile, and I will get around you, and I will make it seem like you're the bad guy. And so...
Ouch.
Oh, it's brutal. I would not want to deal with myself.
Yeah, should have been a lawyer.
I probably
You
would
could be a good lawyer.
I actually could see that. It's interesting because I've talked to you about this before, how you can see how these tricks can be helpful in the courtroom.
Yes.
And really harmful.
Oh my gosh, yeah. You can manipulate the heck out of a court case. Okay,
It does not work in a relationship.
No, you pay for it.
It does not work.
You will pay for it.
You pay for it. Yeah.
Yes. And that's why court cases end with relationships being destroyed.
Of course.
It's completely destructive to relationships. And so, you brought up some. So, well, the biggest mistake I see with couples who are learning nonviolent communication is that they just start arguing about whether you're doing it right or wrong. Because we've just given a whole bunch of rules about say it this way, don't say it this way. And you can't hold somebody to that. So in the book, Nonviolent Communication, Dr. Rosenberg says, hey, this is not about the mechanics. If you learn all the mechanics and lose the spirit, it's gone, right? Yeah. The whole point is having curiosity, revealing your experience in a non-blaming way, and being curious about the other person's experience. Sure. And then allowing each other to be free, right? So let me give you an example that relates to your example. So it's a time I got defensive recently. So I had given away a free resource. It was actually a communication course. I gave away a free resource to anybody who wanted it on social media. And I had a guy reach out to me after I had given him this free course. He messages me a week later, and he says something along the lines of, how dare you give this away and then hide the real help behind a paywall, because now I have to pay you if I want to hire you as a coach.
He felt that you manipulated him.
I felt, yeah.
That's interesting.
Or So I felt really defensive. Now, I'm sad to say I didn't respond in this particular case, because I'd had conversations with this guy in the past that had been problems. But if I'm going to put on my giraffe ears, rather than me get defensive, I could easily respond by saying, wow, you must be really hurting and feeling, maybe you're feeling like you can't get the help that you would really like to have right now, because of what just happened with this course not really being enough to answer your question, and you wanting some more support or something like that. I could the reason why he's communicating to me in a way that's attacking me is because he's in some kind of pain.
Yeah, that's so powerful.
So that would be putting on the giraffe ears.
In that moment, giraffe ears. You're thinking of him as a real person.
Yeah.
As opposed to as just a problem who's annoying me.
Yeah.
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 That's beautiful.
So, I actually, now that we bring it up, because this just happened, I want to go back and follow up with him. But yeah.
It makes your life so much better if you can just see this person as a real person. His desires are just as important as yours. His pain is just as real as yours. And it makes sense that he would be feeling this way given the path that he's walked in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's facing a real disappointment, a real challenge, a real dilemma.
Yes.
He's probably desperate for relationship help. You and I have both been there.
Yep.
It's really, really hard to find someone who can actually help you.
Yes. So, and what happens is when somebody comes to us with an attack like the screw you brought up, And we ask ourselves, what kind of pain or difficulty or dilemma are they in that they would be saying this to me? If we're able to communicate that to them in a way that validates them, that now gives them the opportunity. It's a pattern interrupt, right? If somebody says screw you, they're expecting you to say screw you back.
Yes, they are.
Right? And if you say, hey, I must have really done something to bother you for you to be saying screw you to me. Can you help me understand what that is?
I love that.
They might be shocked.
Yeah.
And it now gives them the opportunity. Now, some people will say, no, F you, I never want to see you again.
Sure.
And some people don't want to, repair the relationship. But for other people, it does create the opportunity now to have the actual type of connection that we're looking for in our relationships.
Good. Okay, Daniel Robertson, where can people find you?
Boom. You can find me at danielrobertson.com.
What a great domain name.
What a great domain name. Perfect. And Facebook is the best place to reach me. Facebook.com/Daniel William Robertson. And I have free resources there.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thanks, James.